Good morning and welcome to today's Elder Financial Abuse and Romance Scam Reporting webinar. My name is Dawn Pagon and I'm the National Manager of Business Development for Credit Unions here at Weltman. I have been with Weltman for over 26 years, strictly working with our credit union clients all over the country. I am a resource here and can assist with any questions you may have. Now let's learn a little bit about our panelists. We'll start off with Sara. Sara, please introduce yourself.
Hi, my name is Sara Costanzo. I'm a shareholder here at the firm. I've been with the firm for 29 years, almost 30, and I have worked in a variety of fields in this firm. So whether it's consumer collections, commercial collections, compliance issues, and now with client relationships, you can certainly reach out to me with any questions. And while we're covering a very broad topic today, we know that there are a lot of stories and issues that are happening. We're definitely available after the session if you have questions and think of things that you don't come up with during the program.
Thanks, Sara. Matt, tell us a little bit about yourself.
Sure. Good morning, everybody. We have a lot of tenure on this call as it happens. I am the youngest Weltman employee here, but I've also been here for a good number of years, excuse me, 22 in fact, exclusively representing credit unions that entire time. I have cut my teeth in the practice of law representing credit unions and continue my practice solely representing credit union clients. Over the course of my time with the firm, I've represented credit unions in a variety of matters from collection-related issues, collection litigation, and then later in time transitioning over to a more corporate counsel-related role where I serve in a representative capacity, reviewing contracts, assisting with regulatory compliance issues, employment-related matters, board-related issues, and essentially any other legally related need of our credit union clients.
Thanks, Matt. Before we get started, I would like to take a moment to go over a few housekeeping items. As a reminder, this is an interactive session, so please submit your questions through the question button in the control panel. Questions will be addressed during the presentation where applicable. This webinar is being recorded. At the conclusion of today's session, a link to the recording and a copy of the presentation slides will be sent to all attendees. Also, there will be a short survey on your screen at the conclusion of the event. Please fill out the survey and share your feedback. We greatly appreciate hearing your opinions on our webinars. Okay, today's agenda, we will be covering what is elder financial abuse, what are romance scams, common types of abuse, understanding applicable laws, and then a short quiz at the end for Matt and Sara to give us their opinion.
Thank you, Dawn. I appreciate that. The first question that we have today, of course, is what is elder financial abuse? Elder financial abuse, as defined by statute, is actually the illegal or improper use of an elder person's funds, property, or resources. So you may ask yourself, well, what is an elder person? What does that definition really mean? And in Ohio, for example, an elder person is defined as someone who's over the age of 60. So anyone that's over 60 does get special protections under the law. And so if you have members in your membership that are over the age of 60, just understand as we go through the presentation, there is some additional requirements on you as a credit union or on me as an attorney or on Matt as an attorney to report certain things and to protect those people. So the abuse part of it, again, illegal or improper use of an elder person's funds, property, or resources. Next.
So what are romance scams? From a high level, romance scams are financial fraud related scenarios where fraudsters use false personas, typically utilizing online resources either through the guise of entering into a romantic relationship or maybe some other lesser, perhaps just a friendly relationship, could be under the guise of investments, you name it, but certainly the romantic piece is on the rise. So for purposes of quickly gaining trust with a victim and ultimately their ultimate purpose is stealing money from the victim. So no matter what the initial basis is, friendship, romance, there's the same end game, stealing money from the victim. With the continuing development of online resources, contact is often made through dating sites or social media. but that's not exclusively what happens. Your members may be contacted via text message, a wrong text message, and then proliferating a relationship through that means. But no matter what they do, the criminals using these platforms take advantage of individuals who may be particularly lonely, quickly professing interest in them, oftentimes love, and thereafter requesting these victims send them money for a variety of fabricated reasons.
So Matt, this can happen to both elder people and young people, right? It's not exclusive to any genre.
Most certainly, and that's what we've seen. I would say in my small sampling, it's a 1/3, 2/3 separation. So a third could be younger people and 2/3 tend to be older.
Okay, next slide. So when we're looking at abusive conduct, and one of which is the financial abuse that I started off with, some examples of that you may see is, number one, taking of money or property, whether they're taking money out of someone's account, whether they're driving their car around town, stealing a house, taking that money or property is certainly abusive. And whoever the victim is kind of tips the scale as to what legislation and what the requirements are on you if you see this, witness this, or understand this. Forging signatures. We see that in all kinds of scenarios, whether someone's forging a real estate document, a bank document, a check, whether they're forging their power of attorney instrument, are these legitimate documents, using deception, coercion, or undue influence to get someone, again, often an older person, to sign a deed, a will, or a power of attorney. So the person may have actually signed the document, they may have a legitimate signature on the document, but if you're observing a third party with them, standing over their shoulder, whispering, stepping in and talking on their behalf, and seemingly providing what's called undue influence, this should be a red flag. This should be something that you're aware of, and again, we'll talk about what you have to do in reporting. Use of an elder person's property or possessions without permission. So are you aware that that elder person may be temporarily or permanently transitioned to skilled nursing? They're in a facility and they're not able to handle their own affairs. So is someone else coming in and withdrawing money? Are we seeing ATM withdrawals come out of a casino, for example? We've seen cases litigate where the elder person isn't at the casino, but somebody else is with their card. It could be a son or daughter, family member, or friend, and that person has no idea that all their money is being taken out and used for impermissible purposes. And in conjunction with some of the romance scams that we'll talk about, promising care or love, or promising to do things for that person in exchange for the money or property. If they, under the guise of it's a short-term loan, or if you cared about me, you'd give me this, but then they don't follow through with the promise. So on the innocent side, I could say, I'll shovel your sidewalk if you pay me $100. If you pay me the $100 and I shovel the sidewalk, there's no problem, right? But if I say I'm going to do these things, or I use undue influence, threaten to not come see you, threaten not to help you run your errands or care for you, if you don't give me money, that's a problem. Or if I take the money and I never do it, I never do the service, I never provide the care, those are things that are considered under the law anyways, abusive conduct. Next slide. Other things that we see, confidence crimes, and this tiptoes into that, romance scam, the use of deception to gain victims' confidences. So we hear about this where, the person believes that they really are their friend, or believes that they really are going to come do work for them or pay them back, and it's really just a deceptive game. The scams is fraudulent and deceptive acts. So it could be starting off as a telemarketing scam, and we see these in the news. The person pretends to be from the IRS telling you have a tax bill that you don't have, pretends to be from the county auditor's office saying you didn't pay your property taxes, when they don't make those types of outbound calls. These perpetrators call victims, email victims, text victims, and they use deception or scare tactics. One of the older ones we've seen was when they would, during spring break time, pretend that your grandson or grandchild has been arrested on spring break. Oh, we need emergency, money must be sent. Don't tell anybody else about it. You don't want to embarrass the grandchild. They're exaggerated situations that put pressure on the victim scare them, want them to be quiet and quickly. It has to be urgent, must send this money, to try not to give the victim any time to really step back and think about if any of the claims being made make sense. You know, do they have them send gift cards instead of money? Are they using the victim's credit card without their permission or with their permission, but you're seeing charges come through that alert you, and there may be triggers set up, right, where a financial institution can set triggers that you're going to see, you know, something that's alarming. The person is here in the state, and all of a sudden you're seeing charges overseas. That should be, you know, alarm that something fraudulent is going on. And then down to fraud, straight out fraud. The use of deception, trickery, false pretense, or dishonest acts or statements for financial gain. These are all things that fall under abusive conduct. They are crimes and they can be prosecuted as such, but they are also in some cases civil actions. And the trick that we have here is a lot of times it's very difficult to identify the criminal, very difficult to find the criminal, very difficult to understand who's behind the calls, the texts, and the actions, because they do use high-level technology to hide behind those internet sources and those phones, so it's difficult to track that. Next slide. So what are some signs that you might look for, that you might see, you know, even whether this is one of your members, whether this is a family member? You know, do you see unpaid bills? The person should have sufficient wherewithal to pay all of their bills, and all of a sudden you're seeing late notices, you're getting delinquency notices, maybe with an obligation they have with you. Is there evidence of a forged signature? I call it the new best friend that comes to the branch and wants to withdraw funds or wants to sign things. We have a new POA in the picture. These are things that should trigger, again, red flag. Is something not right? Is this something that we would suspect is abusive? You know, payment for things that they don't need. Again, if they're going to be in a skilled facility, maybe they broke a hip, why is someone paying for a new pool to be put in their backyard? They're not going to be there with the pool. You know, simple things to keep their house in order if they're listing it to sell it, that's fine. But unnecessary things that are exorbitant. You know, if there's mortgages being paid on more than one home, say, wait a minute, we know this person already paid off their home. Why is this money being paid out to other services that don't make sense for that particular person? Next slide.
So there's a typical playbook with a lot of these scams. And they tend to follow the same MO. Most commonly, the scammer uses some form of online connection, as we mentioned. Typically, the fraudster poses pretty regularly as an attractive person using a fake name and profile. Then he or she works quickly to build a sense of trust with their victim. Once that trust is established, the fraudster professes their love for the victim in a relatively quick time frame, and thereafter talks about having a life together. Any meeting is inevitably delayed for whatever reason. Romance will have to wait. Maybe it's because they're in the military, maybe it's because they're working remotely, or for some other contrived reason. But once the communication is initiated from one form or another, the fraudster will quickly ask to change communication forums in order to continue to communicate in a less secure format. While much of today's discussion talks about romance scams, of course, these scams may not necessarily involve romance, but other contexts such as friendship or investment opportunities. But at the end of the day, they all follow the same objective, which is asking the victim to send money. Next slide. Okay, so red flag indicators are important to take note of. In most cases, the fraudster is not a local. They claim to live remotely, either out of state or abroad. And often because these scammers are in fact abroad, they use improper grammar, even though they may claim to speak English as a first language. And I'm sure all of us have received some sort of fraudulent email along the way with some ultimate goal of getting us to send them money with very broken English. And you know, it's a red flag right away For some of your members, it may not be. So even with that, you need to be mindful what you may, discard very quickly, somebody else may ultimately take to be true. So just something to keep in mind when you're dealing with your members. Other considerations that should raise a red flag: requesting explicit photos or videos from your members, providing a myriad of excuses for not being able to meet in a near term, or being unable to make a call or other contact when scheduled or requested, asking for money, particularly through non-traditional methods such as cryptocurrency, gift cards, or money wires. When the credit union contacts the member to express these concerns, it can be very frustrating, but most times that member's adamant that the scenario is legitimate and that they are not a victim. And nobody wants, if you're that person, they have believed they found the love of their life. For somebody at the credit union outside trying to say this is all false, I mean, that's basically taking away all their hope. So it's very, very hard to get through to some of these people. And I know credit union clients have taken a number of creative steps to try and protect these members, whether it be contacting law enforcement, et cetera, to try and get these people to see the light so they're not scammed. In cases, it could be their life savings. I mean, it's tremendously sad. So, it is certainly a valiant effort. Anything we can do, I would recommend, if you have questions about what you may or may not be able to do when we come into these circumstances, reach out and let us know. We are happy to work with you on case-by-case scenarios. A lot of these have very fact-specific components to them that require some analysis. And that's what we're here for.
And some of these start very innocently, and I'm sure each of you that are attending have had this happen. If you have a social media account, you get a duplicate request for someone to be your friend that you're already connected with, and that's a fake ID. Or you get a text message from a number you don't know, pretending that they know you, and whether you block that or delete that, some people don't realize that they should do that, and technology may have surpassed some of their understanding, or it's just done in such a way that it's trickery. Some of these bad people target, they read the obituaries, and anyone that says that, any obituary that says that the person has a living widow, that's their first target. You may see people comment on social media posts, and it'll be a strange comment on an old post. So it's not something you've posted recently. They'll pull up something you may have posted 2 years ago and post some elaborate long message about wanting to connect with you and be friends. And you have to delete those, report those, and remove them off of your profile. So we've all probably seen some of that, and to Matt's point, hopefully are keen to it and delete it, but understand that a lot of the people that fall for this are victims, and they don't understand that it is a fake person or an attempt to attack them. Next slide. So with that, we're going to talk about a couple of different laws today. These are laws that don't necessarily state in the body of them that this is about scammers, but these are laws that are consistent throughout all states federally and at the state level, that provide protection for either people over the age of 60 or people in general based upon requirements on credit unions, attorneys, other parties, because we're sort of the eyes and ears out there under these statutes to make sure that people are protected. So the first one is the Elder Abuse Justice Act. There's, again, federal and state levels of this. And, we do some training programs on these, and we do help with confirming that you have a standard operating procedure on what the requirements are and that you're compliant with that. The next is the Bank Secrecy Act. That's a federal law, and Matt does do additional training on that particular law and what the requirements are so that you're meeting those requirements and not found to have violated anything. And then, of course, the prior USA Patriot Act, it's a voluntary Part B. Section 314A is involuntary, meaning it's mandatory, but Part B is voluntary, but it does allow you, again, to share information with each other, institution to institution, if in fact you're finding that someone is either money laundering or terrorist activity, which is broad. So again, if someone's attempting as a member to transfer money to someone and you don't know who it is, and it looks suspicious, and there's certain monetary thresholds, then again, you can share that information across institutions under the USA Patriot Act. So keep that in mind. Next slide. So the first one, again, federal law, the Elder Abuse Justice Act. This was signed into law in 2010, and it was put in place as part of the Patient Protection and Affordability Care Act. This provides detection, treatment, understanding, and intervention for elder abuse, neglect, and exploitation. The last word being important, exploitation. So when someone is taking advantage of a person in that protected group, this is the law that helps, and it guides us on what we're supposed to do if in fact we suspect this. So next slide. The Elder Justice Act requires that the Department of Health and Human Services oversees the establishment of a council, an advisory board, actual exploitation centers, funding to state and local protective services, and providing training and programming. So we realize not all law enforcement officers and institutions understand what they're supposed to be doing, but the state agencies, along with federal funding, do have training, and they are able to get involved, whether it's through APS or otherwise, to sort of protect these people and make sure that everyone's doing their part. Next slide. Specifically in Ohio, exploitation is defined as the unlawful or improper act of a person using in one or more transactions an adult or adult's resources for monetary, personal benefit, profit, or gain when they've exerted a control or undue influence basically over that adult or adult's resources. So either without their consent or with their consent if they're forcing it, or beyond the scope of any express or implied consent, and they're doing this by deception, threat, or intimidation. So if at any point one of your members is at either in person or utilizing your account services and you suspect that something's wrong, this doesn't appear to be either their normal course of transactions, or when you ask them, why are you withdrawing $5,000, and they give you a strange answer, things don't look good on the surface, then the state and federal law are going to come into play with respect to your obligations to not only protect that person, but to do some reporting. So next slide. So the reporting is a requirement. Again, any individual having reasonable cause to believe that the adult's being abused, neglected, or exploited, or is in a condition as a result of that, shall immediately report that belief to the County Department of Job and Family Services. So this is not a voluntary thing. This is a requirement. Shall immediately report it, which means, doesn't mean you'll do it at the end of the month, doesn't mean you'll do it when you have time. It actually puts a requirement on you to report it immediately. And then any other person, and we'll see a list of who these parties are, that has that reasonable cause to believe it's voluntary. So we'll show in a second the list of mandatory reporters, but if you happen to not be on the list, then you still have the opportunity to use this statute to comply. So on the next page, we'll move here and show you the mandatory reporters. So you'll see it, we have highlighted in red, credit union employee, but you'll see the very first party on the list is who? Me, an attorney, Matt, an attorney. So attorneys are mandatory reporters, and every other person or occupation listed on here is under the statute as a mandatory reporter. So if you suspect or believe that someone is being abused in this way, you do have to report this to the County Job and Family Services. And again, we do provide specific training classes and standard operating procedures on what to do in these cases. So next, we're going to switch over to the Bank Secrecy Act. I'll give the baton to Matt.
All right, thank you. Bank Secrecy Act. Most everyone participating today is well familiar with the Bank Secrecy Act, as it's a training requirement that most credit unions take annually. And it's important to remember that the BSA requirements apply to today's topics involving elder abuse and romance scams. So, however, oftentimes BSA reporting requirements are overlooked when credit unions are already reporting elder abuse under state or other federal law requirements. But under BSA, which does overlap with state and federal requirements, we still must follow the reporting requirements there, even if they seem duplicative. Ultimately, BSA's purpose is to assist the U.S. government with detecting and preventing money laundering. Next slide. The goals of BSA is to reduce illicit financial threats by ensuring there are systems, procedures, and programs in place to protect against these threats. Such financial threats include romance scams and elder abuse. To aid this goal, part of BSA's focus is to ensure record keeping in a format that can be transmitted to the government to deter and prosecute crime. The formatting and the detail of all that I go into in much greater detail in a BSA training that we typically do at the end of the year. So for credit unions that are interested in that detail, please keep an eye out towards the end of the year for the promotion for that. I believe we typically do that in late November, maybe into early December, that time frame. So we can give more detail there. If you want, we also have those recorded and can make that program available to you in a recorded format. Next slide. Suspicious activity reports, as you are probably aware from the BSA training you take on an annual basis, suspicious activity reports must be filed for a wide variety of reasons, including suspicious crimes that typically they have to exceed $5,000 or more. Remember, the board should be notified on a monthly basis to the extent any SARs are filed. And while there is no requirement to file a SAR for robbery or burglary, theft from a member account does not qualify for this exemption of robbery under the statute. So you would still have to report a SAR in that case. Next slide.
So even if the member is participating, right? They're there saying, I want to give money to my new boyfriend. They're convinced they have a new boyfriend. That's
Sure.
Still, because if you as the institution say this does not pass the sniff test,
Yep.
and I don't want the member to send the money and they won't listen to you, that is suspicious activity, okay?
Yes, indeed. Yep. Yeah. Okay, well, so next slide. Okay, common types of SARs, these are in order. So money laundering is obviously at the top, followed by check fraud. And that accounts for about 90% of the fraud historically, although this is somewhat old. So crypto, for example, is probably moving up on that list pretty quickly. But related to this list, there's certain methodology that they use, and I think elder abuse and romance scams utilizing money laundering and check fraud are definitely up there as well. So this will continue to rise. It's going to be continually an increasing problem, and one that the credit unions are going to want to keep their eye on.
And a lot of victims, they're the bad party that asks them to use Bitcoin, crypto coin, weird gift card purchases, and they're making false statements. So that's where a lot of that falls into. These reports need to be filed. They're required to be filed. Even if, again, the member is participating, they're a victim, but they're essentially getting pulled into money laundering and things like that.
Right. So it's important to remain vigilant and keep an eye out for this sort of fraud, keeping in mind the red flags that I mentioned earlier. Next slide. SAR confidentiality is something we want to be mindful of. It is imperative to not forget that filing a SAR itself is confidential. You cannot tell a member, the member's family, that the SAR itself was filed or anything about it. Even if you're subpoenaed, you cannot respond to the subpoena and provide information related to the SAR or its existence. That's not allowed. If you are, for whatever reason, requested to provide SAR-related information, you must notify the federal government. If you're unsure of how to do that via SIN or otherwise, we can get involved and typically do and facilitate that notification. So feel free to reach out to us if should that come up, and we're happy to assist. Another point that I always like to make is that you're immune from liability for filing a SAR. And what I mean by that is you do not need to worry about some claim of discrimination or defamation coming back to you because you filed the SAR. The government wants to ensure bad actors are caught, and they're not going to allow such people, even if they turn out not to be, to raise claims of discrimination and defamation against the good folks at the credit union, or that might inhibit their willingness to cooperate. So you have immunity here. Very important to keep that in mind as you're working through these. Okay, next slide. Okay, there are different thresholds for reporting and filing a SAR. If the activity is internal within your organization and involves staff or board members, there's no limit. Even $1 would trigger the need to file a SAR. More commonly, where the suspect can be identified, such as a member or somebody the member brings in, that threshold is $5,000. And in the case of many romance scams like we're talking about today, where we're never going to identify the suspect because they've never stepped foot in the US and we don't know their whereabouts, the threshold's $25,000. So just something to keep in mind as we move through this.
And for the purposes of the SARs, though, the suspect is really your victim member and the unknown third party that's convincing them to do these bad acts. They're convincing them to put money in the stream of commerce that could be money laundering. So both of them are your potential suspects.
Good point of clarification, yes. All right.
Next slide.
Next slide, please. So this slide delineates the instances as to when you should file a SAR. I would not get too caught up in the detail on this, but only generally take note of the requirements set out here. I would rather keep a more general viewpoint in mind. If the transaction doesn't look right or sound right, get a second set of eyes on the situation, or even a third. As I mentioned earlier, the credit union and individuals have immunity for filing a SAR. So when in doubt, file. You are only out the time it takes to do so. Next slide. As it relates to wire transfers, scammers pressure members to wire money to them because it's an easy way to take their money and disappear. Wiring money is like sending cash. Once it's sent, your member usually can't get it back. If something seems suspicious, ask your member if they have met the recipient in person. If not, strongly discourage your member from sending the wire, no matter what the reason it was given to them. Scammers know that once your victim wires the money to them, there's usually no way to get it back. Scammers can quickly pick up the victim's money at any wire transfer company location throughout the world. And it's nearly impossible to identify who picked it up and then thereafter try and track it down. Scammers also know the victim won't have the same protections if they get paid using another form of payment, such as a credit card. So that's, again, why wires are so popular. Credit unions themselves can be larger targets for wires fraud activity, since they are viewed as a smaller, less secured, smaller and with less security protocols, I guess I would say. So that's something you also need to keep an eye on. Where your member is insistent on moving forward with the wire, have them sign an acknowledgement and maybe a hold harmless agreement to limit the credit union's risk. I would highly recommend that. But if the transaction is greater than $3,000 and they are insistent on moving forward, you need to record and retain the following information. You need to obtain the name and address of the originator, the amount of the transaction, the execution date, payment instructions, identity of the beneficiary bank, where the money's going, and that all must be retained for 5 years. So that follows generally BSA record retention requirements. There's a 5-year term pretty much associated with all of it.
Next slide. So some tips in fraud prevention, and the fraud prevention again covers both the elder abuse issues and the romance scams of any age, but use due diligence to help detect these transactions. Does the transaction make sense? Are they sending money to someone that you've met or seen that they've sent money to in the past? Is it a small $50 gift for a birthday, or is it all of a sudden a $5,000 gift and then another $5,000 gift? Are they clearing out their account? Is it more money than they're not leaving enough money to sustain their own bills and expenses? Is it a large amount of money, or is it a series of smaller amounts that total a large amount of money? Invert the problem. Consider this situation from the thief's perspective. What is that person doing with the money? Again, if they say, my grandson needs this, or I'm helping someone buy a car, or any of these things, asking the right questions, not to put the person on alert or feel embarrassed, but to get them to understand that you're asking questions to protect them and to protect you. The questions should be open-ended to allow them to tell a story rather than a yes or no to you, so that way you can ascertain at least a little bit more information. Next slide.
Sara, we have a question.
Oh, wonderful.
SAR reporting requires us to submit a dollar amount involved with the suspicious activity. Sometimes reporting elder abuse to the county doesn't involve a dollar amount. How do we file a SAR in these cases? I have a member who we prevented from providing his account credentials to a new friend in England. He is 78 years old. No money was involved.
Matt and I could come up with some answers here, but initially my inkling is I would, if there's no money amount and the person was about to provide their information to a stranger for an elder abuse, I would put as the amount, the entire amount in their account, because that thief could very quickly, by getting access to the account, could have wiped it out. So on your SARS report, put the extent of the exposure was the entire amount held on deposit. Do you agree, Matt?
I do.
Okay. Thank you. So, the next thing is really also educating your members. So you should be alerting members about specific warning signs. If you have the ability to put any literature inside your institution, or if you have the ability, I've seen some credit unions have information on their website about how to avoid or alert members to the target that they are, whether it's romance scams, friendship scams, or as Matt said earlier, investment scams. Anywhere that you can put that information, again, paper in your institution, in the lobby, or online, is a great way to educate your members. Asking certain questions, again, not belittling them or not making them embarrassed, but things like, what? It sounds like you might be the victim of a scam, and sometimes that could scare someone, but talk to them about how that person plans to use the money, and how, if they're lending money to a third party to help them get farm equipment or something that they've been tricked into doing, how do you plan to get paid back? Have you met this person? Have you spoken to them? Have you seen them? Did you have them sign any type of legal document that they actually will pay you back? If they respond with something that sounds rehearsed, understand that fraudsters often rehearse these things with their victim and give their victim blanket answers to say to you when they go to get money out. So they try to prepare them to thwart any of your attempts to help them out. So if they give you a blanket answer, home improvements, you could say, well, I thought you did home improvements on your house last year. What are you doing now? Oh, are you putting a new floor in? Or, explain more questions to get more information and see if you can get past the fake answer that person told them to give you. Ask them, have they talked to an accountant, especially if this is some sort of fake investment? Do they have a financial advisor? Is there someone that's trusted? You could ask if they've discussed this with their spouse or their children. Do they have any siblings that are reviewing this as a potential investment as well? And you could even ask them things like, is this a registered investment advisor? Is this someone with a license that you've seen and you've looked them up online to assure that they really are who they say they are? Those are things that can help the member perhaps maybe be self-aware that they are being tricked. There's a lot more to go into depth here. Again, we do some additional in-depth training programs for these, but we want to do a short little quiz. So on the next slide, we're going to go through just a couple scenarios and explain why it may or may not be abusive or suspicious. So Dawn, you want to ask Matt and I these?
Sure. 75-year-old widow walks into a branch and asks to withdraw all the money in his or her savings account.
Okay, so on its face, is that abusive? No. A person is allowed to take their money out of their account. They're allowed to close their account. But if you go back to the other slides where we talked about asking questions, could this be abusive? Could this be something that needs to be reported as a SARs, suspicious activity? Well, certainly if they have a lot of money versus $5, certainly if there's someone standing behind them you've never seen before, whispering in their ear, telling them what to do. Certainly if the person appears to no longer have mental capacity or status, they have Alzheimer's or dementia, there's other basis or facts that could come into play that would absolutely trigger your obligation to file an abuse report. They're 75, over the age of 60, they're protected, and depending on the amount of money and what's going on, definitely could be suspicious. Matt, any additional?
Yeah, these come up and across my desk, or I get phone calls on these issues, and sometimes it's after the fact, and the attorney's saying, well, why wasn't this, and this done? Well, what is this, and this? Well, in one case, there was a joint account holder. The joint account holder wasn't notified. Perhaps the credit union could have reached out to the joint account holder saying, are you aware that there's transactions on your account, or there's going to be, that sort of thing? Or is there a trusted contact that's been put on the account that should have been reached out to say, hey, listen, these transactions are occurring, just to let you know. And so sometimes that's done, sometimes that's not. Credit unions have procedures in place generally for these types of situations, so they'll want to revisit those and see how the fact pattern that's in front of them applies to their policy.
We have another question.
Okay.
Matt and Sara, if we have a member who is the victim of a scam, why would we name them as a suspect on the SAR? If we're naming them as a suspect, the reporting threshold is 5K, but if the member is the victim and the unknown fraudster is the suspect, then the reporting threshold is 25K.
Well, because if the member is the one who's actually taking the steps to commit the crime, meaning I'm going to transfer $5,000 to an account in Lithuania, I could be committing money laundering. Whether or not I realize it or not, that's up to the prosecutors to determine whether they're going to press charges. But on its face, that person is participating in a crime. So that keeps your threshold lower. And again, whether they're a member or whether they're sitting at home pilfering and stealing money, you don't know. All you can do is look at the facts. Someone came in, took $5,000 and transferred it to Lithuania. Is this a problem? You're not the finder of fact. You just look at it and you have to report what appears to be abusive and or suspicious.
Thank you, Sara. Second question on our quiz, transferring an elder person's home to family. Yes or no?
This one often happens when they're looking for someone to be a notary or a witness. So they may come in and ask you, you have a notary or a witness that can help. Okay, fine. What am I notarizing? If they're selling their house or they're doing estate planning, understand when someone goes to an attorney to do real estate planning, they normally have a notary there. If they're coming to you to do some sort of one-off estate planning, again, a red flag. Is this, something where they've talked their entire time about transferring a house to a family member? It's their son or daughter who's been in the picture the entire time. That isn't necessarily abusive or suspicious. But if there's other facts that come into play where, again, is the person suffering from Alzheimer's or dementia and doesn't even understand what they're signing? Is the person that's bringing them there a new friend that hasn't been around before? Are they afraid to talk in detail about why they're transferring this house? Other factors come into play as to whether this could be abusive or suspicious conduct. On its face, not necessarily, but it's about asking those additional questions.
Thank you. Third one, changes in members' financial behavior.
So this one could be tracked if there's technological advances, tracking behavior for certain things, that would alert you to, for example, when there's a bad check, if this person's never written bad checks and all of a sudden 10 checks bounce, is there a problem? What's going on? If this person normally just brings cash in every Friday and all of a sudden they're withdrawing money instead of putting money in, are there things that have changed over the course of your relationship with your member that would, give you cause for pause, we'll call it.
Okay. Living in an elder member's home.
So again, on its face, not a problem. Lots of people return back. There's, multiple generations that may live in a home. The part that may be suspicious or become abusive is the member still living there, or has someone become what I call a squatter? If the member is transitioned to a nursing home and that's their new residence, and their house really should be being listed for sale to support them and use their resources for their benefit, but a new person has moved in and taken over and is using that elder person's money to make improvements or put pools in the house or things that don't jive, again, if it doesn't pass the sniff test, then perhaps this is an abusive situation.
Wiring funds to an unknown account overseas. Ding, ding.
Very suspicious, very suspicious. Right? That's about on the spectrum as suspicious as it gets.
Right.
That's something we would definitely want to discourage our members from trying to do. There'd have to be a very good story there that added up.
Okay. The inclusion of additional names on an elder member's deposit account signature card.
So again, on its face, could be completely explainable and completely fine. Oftentimes as people get older, they do add a son or daughter to their account. The questions that you want to ask or find out is this a son or daughter? Are they here locally helping you? Is this just a payable on death beneficiary, or are they somehow now going to be a joint account holder? Do they understand that they have other options? So again, if they're really just trying to assure that if something happens, another person could step in to assist them. Do they have a power of attorney in place? Have they talked to their financial advisor? Have they talked to an estate planning attorney versus just adding this new person on their account or on their signature card? The conversation, the questions is what will help identify if this is abusive or suspicious.
Yeah, and generally speaking, if you can kind of take two avenues. You either put a beneficiary on your account. Certainly, we would encourage all credit union members to have a beneficiary listed so that the funds in your accounts don't go to probate. Probate's bad. We don't want probate, right? You want to avoid that. But the other thing you can do is add them as a joint account holder. But do you want that? Do you want them to have ownership rights in your account that they can withdraw all the money while you're living or after, but that it becomes their money at your death? If you don't care, then add them as a joint account holder. If you're saying, no, I don't want them to be a beneficiary, I want them to help me with my day-to-day transactions, I can't get to the credit union, so I'm going to have them serve as my agent under a POA. POA is what we want to do. Then that way they're only transacting pursuant to the POA. It can be revoked at any time. It can be limited in nature in terms of what they're allowed to transact on. And when the member passes away, the POA ceases to take effect, and they no longer have any ability to claim anything on that account. So it really depends what your objective is. Those are different tools to facilitate different objectives.
Right. Okay, next slide.
Just some interesting facts. The Federal Trade Commission received more than 269,000 reports of romance scams between 2019 and 2023, with total reported losses of $4.5 billion.
So understand, that data is already almost 2 years old. The numbers are getting worse. The numbers are going up. So you can see as the person gets older, you know, in their 50s and their 60s, it skyrockets. And that's why, you know, these laws are in place again to protect people over the age of 60, but also to require you report any activity regarding someone of any age if it doesn't pass the sniff test. Next slide. So some things that we've seen that are in the pipeline, you know, so we talked about 3 different pieces of legislation that are currently guiding you and mandating what you do, but there is a House bill pending with the federal government called the Romance Scam Prevention Act. It's House Bill 2481. It's basically limited in scope. It's targeted primarily for online dating websites and apps, so that if someone does put up a fake profile or attempts to target people through an app, those apps would have to then shut down the person's access, report it, and there would be some more safeguards there to protect someone that was legitimately trying to use an online dating site or app. So that piece of legislation is very narrow in scope, but again, because it's just pending with the House, that very well could change and expand over time. And that's currently set for the Federal Trade Commission to govern that if it becomes enacted. There is another site, and we gave a link here, so you can follow that link to some of the guidance through the state of Ohio. But with the Security and Exchange, the Security Division with the state of Ohio, they actually have some online tools for you to report and some tools for tips, things to follow, and also some materials that you could have if you don't currently have anything on your website or you don't currently have written materials in your lobby. This is where you could get some additional information that you could print off to include for your members, or even include in if you have, you know, newsletters or anything like that that you could put out there. So consider those just some additional guides, and understand that there is pending legislation that could increase what your requirements are for reporting and involvement. We have seen other cases. If you do any searches online, we've seen plenty of them in the news. We've even seen some credit unions choose to close a member's account. And so something Matt pointed out earlier, having the member sign an acknowledgement that the credit union did advise them that this appears to be a scam, that their activities appear to not be in line with safeguards for financial activity. You could have let them withdraw all their money and close their account and indicate to them that as a credit union, you don't want to participate in fraudulent activities, so you are not going to allow them to wire, to transfer, to do things through your institution. Instead, you're going to have them sign something, close the account, and wish them the best of luck, but of course still file your reports based upon either their age or the activity. So there's several things we could talk through with you. And again, if you have scenarios that you want to go through, or you're interested in the additional training or SOPs that we have, certainly please reach out to Dawn as your point of contact. Dawn will get a hold of us. We can get things scheduled. She has all the relevant information to be able to get a program put together for you.
We do have another question. On the international wires, what would be the definition of a known account versus an unknown account? Would that only be to an account in their own name? If not, what qualifies in your opinion?
International account.
So if someone has an account at your credit union and they come in and they say, I want to wire money to Zimbabwe, who are they wiring the money to? Are they wiring money to an actual relative? Maybe they're from Zimbabwe and they've moved here, relocated here, and they travel there all the time. That's not necessarily something that's suspicious if it's something they've done and you recognize the transaction. It's been done before. Maybe they have a brother that lives there, a mother that lives there. We have a lot of international population in our jurisdiction here in Ohio, even, where people come here, they travel back to where their homeland is, and they transfer money, not a problem. If on the other hand, they come in, they've been born and raised here, never traveled outside the United States, you know them well enough as your member, and all of a sudden they want to transfer $10,000 to Zimbabwe, and you ask them, do you know anybody in Zimbabwe? Nope. That's an unknown account. That's a clear unknown account. Who are they doing this to? What are they buying? They're not getting new china and dishes from Zimbabwe, and they don't cost $10,000. So unknown account is a broad term. It could mean lots of things, but that's, in my opinion, one of the most clear examples. I don't know if, Matt, you have more to that?
Nope, that sounds about good.
Okay.
Okay,
Thank
so
you.
next slide, we do provide our contact information. Again, if you have questions, I know oftentimes I don't think of anything until I'm driving in the car an hour after something, so don't feel bad. We're here for you. We're here to answer your questions. And again, if you want additional training or services, definitely reach out to Dawn.
Thanks, Sarah and Matt. And thank everyone for attending today's Weltman webinar. We hope you find this presentation informative. As a reminder, a short survey will pop up on your screen when the webinar ends. Please share your feedback and let us know what future webinar topics you would like to see. I would also like to share that we have a complimentary library of over 40 webinars that you and your team can view on demand. Our collection offers information on various topics such as collateral recovery, real estate, and bankruptcy, to name a few. We'll send you a link to the library in our follow-up email. Thank you again for attending, and have a great rest of your day.
Thank you.
Thanks, everybody.